demographic is find others who are really, they're really involved, really into it, and influencers in that specific demographic, and have them talk to the demographic because it's much more relatable. But I would just like to share this clip of the Mesa vlog where they explain what they're trying to do. Please go ahead and roll that.
Okay. So, are you ready?
Wait, let's back up a minute. Not that far. Back to a time when the city wanted to grow social media. They needed new ideas, so I thought, let's start a vlog. But not everybody knew what that was.
What is a blog?
Basically, we would make videos, put them on YouTube, and ask for suggestions. It was that simple. Or was it? The beginning was a little rough, but we kept at it. People started watching. Kids started watching.
On the vlog, guys.
And then people started suggesting ideas. So we did them. And the crazy thing is, our numbers started growing. They started growing because it's loose. It's raw. It's real.
I like this one a lot, and so does their target age group, which is them, and they watch it and they respond to it. And I think the key here is that they aren't facing the camera and saying, hi, welcome to our vlog today. Today we have this lined up and we're going to do this with these people, and come on in, let's talk to you. Instead, they invite them behind the scenes. They say, come on, we're going to try this today. I don't know, do you know that? I don't know that. And they figure it out. And it is just a really great way to show that experience of behind the scenes. They get involved with the police department, with public works, with traffic, with every job that you can imagine. It's kind of like the Mike Rowe jobs, dirty jobs, where he goes through in different experience. They put the hard hats on, they actually do everything, and some of it is quite difficult to do, so it's just fun to watch them.
Okay. So,
the other bit of advice I would have, and I think you probably know this, is that you can't be old school government, you have to be creative. And what do I mean by old school government? I mean, that public access-y sort of old school 1970s vibe, and just keep doing it, keep doing the same thing. We were on the cable channel, now we're on the digital tier, now we're on the internet, let's have a 2-hour-long show, and people are just gonna watch it. It's that idea of you've got to get creative, and the fun part is we're seeing that a lot of government agencies have the leeway now to where they can experiment with that creativity. The key a lot of times is getting that buy-in to try that first thing, and then once you do, you have that creativity. On and off social media, in and out of video. This was the first time, I don't know, maybe you guys have heard of this before. This is the first time I've ever seen a city do this. It was the city of Suwanee, Georgia, and their annual report, most cities do one of these, they turned it into an actual comic book. One of the villains was Status Quo. And in this scene here, Status Quo is grilling their director of finance about expenditures. And at first I thought, oh, okay, government trying to be creative. And then I started reading it and I was like, why am I still reading this? I can't stop reading this. It's about an annual report and budgets and expenditures and things like that. But it was just fascinating because it was in a different format, and it really did get you reading to the end. It's probably the only annual report for any government agency that many people have ever read. I'm the executive director of an organization called the Government Social Media Organization, or GIZMO for short. And we have a pretty awful logo. This is our logo. It's one of those things where we're under the gun, so I did one of those things where let's just take a letter and make it a different font. No one will know, and they'll all think it's a logo. It's not really a logo. It's just an acronym. But at any rate, so I thought about, well, how can I get members engaged? Maybe we can do a crowdsourcing contest for a logo. And then I remembered, wait, wasn't there some sort of UK research vehicle that did this crowdsourcing contest to name a $285 million research vessel, and the name that the public selected was Bodie McBoatface. Do you remember that? This is what the internet voted on, was Bodie McBoatface. And officials said, this is a contest. But when Bodie McBoatface surfaced as #1, they said, we're not naming that ship that. Costs too much money, no. And they faced public backlash because the public said, hey, come on. If you're going to do a contest and have us select to the top via crowdsourcing a name, you've got to stick with it. And they didn't. If you have been following this actually afterwards, after they faced all this public outcry because of this, they did subsequently name a couple of smaller, like submersible research vessels. They look like little tiny submarines. They did name those Bodie McBoatface. And it really worked well because they incorporated it into a grade school level educational campaign for what it was all about. But didn't make any sense because they weren't actually boats. They were more like submarines, but whatever. And then I remembered the other crowdsourcing contest after Bodie McBoatface. It was to name a train near, I think, like Switzerland. Trainy McTrainface. This was voted tops by the internet. But you know what? They decided to stick with it because they didn't want to have the outcry that Bodie McBoatface got, so they actually named one of their trains Trainy McTrainface. Overseas, I believe the Dorchester Council in the UK, they had a contest to name their street vehicles. These are called gritters. And they went totally the other direction. They actually encouraged creative names. In fact, their fleet already included Brad Gritt and Britney Spears. So for this new contest, in the running was the much more talented Whitney Houston and Grit Balls of Fire. But the winner, believe it or not, was Gritsy Bitsy, Teeny Weeny Yellow Anti-Slip Machine. Come on! I think they just did this because they wanted them to, to see kind of like how they printed that on the side of the gritting machine. But so after that, I realized, ooh, I'm not having a crowdsourcing contest unless they have some really ironclad rules for we get to decide which ones actually get voted on, in which case, what's the point in crowdsourcing? You know those highway signs? That are kind of to alert people what's coming, slow down, buckle up, kind of some boring things like that. Well, I've heard about some agencies doing crowdsourcing campaigns for that, which is creative, but even more creative is some departments of transportation are just taking it upon themselves to post some wild and fun messages on their signs to get interest from people. I think it's the Massachusetts Department of Transportation just basically says, use your blinker. I'm trying, was that right? Yeah. I feel like it's pretty phonetic. Use your blinker. You gotta say it like that, you too. Use your blinker. And the Virginia Department of Transportation, they are also experimenting with some fun message board signs, but they do it strategically and they coordinate it with the rollout of various movies so that they're in line with a trending topic. For instance, with Star Wars, they put speeding leads to the dark side. They've had some other clever ones too. They had one that was drive hammered, get nailed. I like puns and word plays and everything, so I was like, huh. But they did actually have one that didn't turn out so well. They planned this along with the Black Panther movie that was coming out that weekend, and unfortunately it didn't work out so well because it caused bottlenecks because people were slowing down to take pictures of it while they were driving. Wakanda driver are you? Safety is king. Wakanda? What kind of? Think about it. What does this sign mean? Deer crossing, yes. So another Department of Transportation in Iowa, when they don't have any ideas for what to share on social media, a lot of times they'll just turn to the questions that they get a lot of times from residents. Spoiler alert, some of the questions are really, really dumb. So Iowa has a lot of deer, and so they put these deer signs out to alert drivers that this is a common area for deer and use caution as you're driving in the area. Well, they actually get a question a lot from people driving through the area. Why don't you put these signs where it's safer for deer to cross? Think about it. The answer, of course, is that deer can't read signs. People can. So then they turn this into social media posts where they say, hey, we get this question a lot. And then in the comments for this particular one, it was hilarious how many people are like, yeah, I had a neighbor that thought the same thing. And it's not like, so for you, those of you who don't get it, other people explain it to them later. Oh, this is one of my favorite police department tweets ever. Arrested a 28-year-old man today for stealing a Twilight Saga DVD box set. Store owner suggested making him watch it as punishment. I love that one. Sometimes the best content for social media is stuff that happens in real life. A final thought that I'd like to share with you today, and also it looks like I kind of rushed through some things, and so I have some time if we did want to open it up to Q&A. I've got another 15 minutes to speak with you, but I wanted to share with you that you're not alone on this journey. One of the reasons I love conferences like this is that you have other Natoans that you can work with, you have peers. This is all for networking and collaborating with each other. And you always have people who will help advise you what works best and what the best techniques are. And you always have that resource available. And you all have your government programming awards. In the social media space, in social media and government, we have the Golden Post Awards, which is ironically the same acronym, the GPA Awards, but I'm sure you thought of it first. And you recognize the pillars in your programming. Well, in the social media and government space, some of the best practices that we look to, winners of awards, if you look at the stories behind them, they didn't take place by accident. There was a team behind it. And for instance, the Lawrence, Kansas Police Department on Twitter, they just kill it on Twitter. If you're on Twitter and you haven't heard of the Lawrence, Kansas Police Department, then you're not really using Twitter because they are doing a phenomenal job on Twitter. But if you ask Drew Fennelly and Derek Smith, who are the officers behind some of their ingenious posts on Twitter, they do a lot of collaboration, and they've made some mistakes. They've made some big mistakes, but they've learned from it every single time along the way. Not many police departments can say that they've had a tweet that has earned over 500,000 likes on it. They're doing something right. They've been all over network news. They've been everywhere. There's a long backstory for this one to have it make sense. Just look it up. But they are known for being very, very humorous on Twitter. The transportation system, the light rail system in San Francisco, BART, they came under fire for having a lot of equipment failures, and it was on a particular day where the trains were breaking down and a lot of people were unhappy. They were turning to Twitter. What conspired on Twitter is what we've come to call in the government social media space BART honest tweets. And it's where BART actually, through a series of tweets throughout the day, had an extremely candid, vivid, specific view of what was actually happening with their equipment failures. They were being honest about the fact that their system has reached the end of its useful life. Their social media person looked like they were so on point. They had all these technical answers. They had an answer for everything, but mostly it was that honesty and candidness, and it wasn't just the typical response of, you know, we're sorry, we're doing the best we can, but they're saying, our equipment stinks. Here's the situation that the equipment is. No, by the way, we're going to have a bond for this, you know, this equipment later. But it's become known as the BART's honest tweets. If you ask Alicia Trost, who's a communications manager for BART, this didn't happen by accident. They had a team. Behind the scenes, they came up with messaging. They came up with what their key points were, what their messaging was. They got language approved beforehand, so they were able to make these statements. There was a team behind it. And finally, the iconic CIA's first tweet. We can neither confirm nor deny that this is our first tweet. This was received very well. This is a few years old now, but this was, in fact, I think, the CIA's first tweet. And if you ask Carolyn Reams, she's the team lead at the CIA, it was actually a team. A team came up with multiple possible first tweets for the CIA, and this was the one that won out. And it was, again, received very well. People loved it. For a government agency that was entirely clandestine in nature, its whole purview was about secrecy, this worked really well. But again, it was a team, it was support. So I would leave you today in the very capable hands of your other NATOA members who are there to support you. There are other people who are trying to do good things in this world, and they always have your back. So thank you.
Are there any burning questions for Christy?
Yes,
Mike.
I'll be here. Okay, great.
I have to ask about the orange elephant firm. These are government resources completed by our chief executive of the United States. And, you know, it's not a question about whether or not it's a public forum. I mean, because that's actually subject to what the law is.
It,
Whether or not that's such a public forum because of the nature of the officials.
sure.
Working on a private team. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, I have to say that every time the president tweets, people look at our organization and ask us, what's going on? And we say, we don't actually, even though we're government social media, we have no part in that whatsoever. But if you had asked me a few years ago, I would have said, like everyone else has said, you know, there just really isn't any case law on this, and so we really don't know what to say. And I'm not a lawyer, but I can certainly see the cases that are out there now, and it's interesting, even over the last year, the different cases that have come through the courts in various local level courts, and we did have one Supreme Court case that was related to, I believe it was social media use by convicted sex offenders in North Carolina, but as a result of that ruling, they specified that that basically social media, the act of a like, was equivalent to freedom of speech. And I think that is significant in a ruling to come out of the Supreme Court. We've also had other courts decide various cases. President Trump was sued for his Twitter profile for blocking users. And on Twitter, you can block people, and blocking people on Twitter means that if they're logged in as their profile, they can't see your tweets. And so as a part of the court case, it was basically saying that by restricting us from following you as an official representative of the government, you're restricting me from seeing important updates from the government. And also by blocking me, you won't see my speech as well. And so I think that the courts are starting to make these opinions that's leaning towards it being a public forum, that are leaning towards actions on social media being equivalent to freedom of speech and likes. And that's one of the most fascinating areas in social media as it pertains to government is what actually what government employees are doing on social media, and court cases that are coming about because of that as well, and the fact that you can actually be fired over what you do on social media on your personal time in some cases, because is what you said, is that speech that is protected, or is that speech that's just complaining about a coworker, or is it complaining about conditions of work or other things that are protected? So after that court case ruling, the Twitter account for @RealDonaldTrump did unblock those individuals and those accounts. Thank you. Thank you for asking. I'll be around afterwards too.
Thanks again, Christy. I know that in my house, YouTube definitely dominates, but it's usually my kids watching videos of other kids playing video games. So I don't know that one, but it's a thing. Thanks again to SmartWorks for sponsoring this lunch. Really appreciate it. Just a couple of housekeeping reminders. For our market reception tomorrow night at Reading Terminal Market, your badge is your entry ticket. Make sure that you have your badge with you. If you purchased a guest ticket, you'll want to see the registration desk and get an extra blank badge from there, and that will be the entry for your guest. Let's see. Oh, there are no ticket sales tomorrow afternoon or during the event. So if you do want to buy a guest ticket, you have to do so before tomorrow afternoon. Am I capturing this correctly? Okay. And tonight we have afternoon sessions. After that, we have our happy hour sponsored by Comrex. Your drink tickets are on the back of your badge. And if you are attending chapter meetings tonight, there is a list of where those will be held at the registration desk. So I think that's all. Thanks so much. Thanks again.